A new Taliban video of Sergeant Bergdahl coming back into U.S. hands is now inflaming tensions over the recovered soldier. Nowhere more so than on Capitol Hill, where ire is mounting by the minute at the president's failure to notify Congress about the handoff and about the release of 5 Guantanamo Bay detainees to secure it.
People are just understandably so upset about this. I heard about it this morning speaking to a Rotary Club. It was one of the big questions that they had. What are you going to do to the president? Why did he do it this way? Why did he do it in secret? Why does he think he can work outside the law?
And even the Democratic chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Dianne Feinstein, says it's unclear why the White House didn't go through the necessary channels.
As I understand, he was undernourished, not necessarily malnourished, but undernourished, and that the last assessment had been made just a few months before. I think it was in December of last year. So unless something catastrophic happened, I think there was no reason to believe that he was in instant danger.
That's both a political and a legal question. That's because under the 2014 Defense Authorization Act, the Secretary of Defense is supposed to notify Congress 30 days prior to any transfer of Gitmo detainees. The president did issue a signing statement at the time saying he thought he could override that restriction, but there's no sense of whether that's going to stand up to the Hill and potentially at some point the courts. Joining me now is Congresswoman Lois Frankel of Florida. She's a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, and her son is a Marine veteran who served in Afghanistan and Iraq. Congresswoman, thank you so much for your time. I know you feel really passionately that no soldier should be left behind, as the president said, and that bringing Sergeant Bergdahl home was a good thing to do. But do you not think the president needed to disclose more earlier to Congress about this?
Well, there have been a lot of questions that are raised. And I'm going to hold judgment on that. I have great confidence that my colleagues back in Congress and the Senate that will take a good, careful look. And I hope and expect that the president's going to give us some answers so we can come to that judgment.
Well, setting aside this case, in principle, do you think that when releasing prisoners like senior Taliban leadership, Congress should hear about it ahead of time?
Well, that's the law, and I certainly believe in the rule of law. The president has said that there were exigent circumstances. I think he does owe it to the Congress to let us know what they are, and then we'll make a judgment after that. But I think here's what's important for me, and that is we have brought a prisoner of war back. There's been a lot of complaints, I think, by some that he wasn't worthy of being brought back. I think that the principle that we leave no fallen soldier on the ground, that we bring our men and women back from war, is a good principle. Otherwise, we have every man for themselves a type situation, which I think would bring chaos.
Congresswoman, what about the release of these Guantanamo Bay detainees? Does that risk putting a price on the heads of other servicemen, given that this was, although the White House isn't using the word, essentially a swap of sorts?
Well, I will tell you this. I think our servicemen always have a target on their back. This is a very dangerous world. You know, there were essentially, it seems, a couple of ways to get the soldier back. One was by a military action, which I don't know was possible, and apparently, you know, you put more soldiers at risk. The other is some type of negotiation. The president made a judgment call. I know there's going to be a lot of time now for us to take a look at as to whether or not we agree or disagree with that judgment call. I'd like to wait and hear some more of the facts.
Congresswoman, as we mentioned, this is also a personal question for you. Your son is a Marine veteran.
Yes.
What was it like for you to watch that video of Sergeant Bergdahl's release?
You know, I've said this before. I think for a parent whose child goes to war, one of the greatest nightmares is not that your child will be killed. That is a nightmare, but that they're going to be captured and who knows what, put in a cage, tortured. I mean, the thoughts are almost unimaginable. And I just thought about his parents. I can't even, I mean, the exhalation, the relief that they feel, it brought a lot of tears to my heart.
Congresswoman Lois Frankel, I'm glad your own family is safe, and a lot of us share that reaction to watching that video. Joining me again now to dissect the political reaction to this is Karen Finney, former communications director for the DNC and also host of Disrupt on MSNBC, and John Feehery, Republican strategist and president of Quinn Gillespie Communications. John, if this were a Republican president and we had this same swap, do you think it would get the same kind of blowback? How much is this a political question rather than a substantive one?
I think it's mostly substantive, to be honest with you. And I think if someone like a John McCain, who was a prisoner of war, or Sam Johnson, who was a prisoner of war, and they're outraged about this, not about the politics, they're outraged because they don't think that this was a good trade for national security. So I think it's a very substantive argument that we have here. And you got to understand about Bergdahl, he wasn't captured by the enemy. He kind of wandered off and then was kind of almost gave himself up to the enemy. So I think that's a different thing entirely than just kind of being captured in a dogfight. You know, this is some substantive questions, and Congresswoman Frankel is absolutely right. We got to get to the bottom of all those questions and find out what exactly happened.
But you brought in the desertion allegation. Should that even make a difference, Karen?
Well, I mean, but more importantly, it's an allegation. We don't, I mean, John, you are not in a position to say that you know exactly what happened because nobody really knows what's happened. Let's give this young man an opportunity to give his side of the story before we go convicting him. That is part of our American values, that we let somebody be innocent until proven guilty, John. I think, look, I think the principle is, and look, I hate the fact that this is political. I really wish that this was not so political, but if we want to go to politics, let's go to politics. Hundreds of prisoners were released from Guantanamo Bay by President George Bush, many of whom returned to the battlefield. So if we're going to be angry now, we should have been angry then.
But how many documented instances of this being a swap? I mean, it's the tit for tat that people find potentially dangerous.
Well, and again, I think we don't have all of the information, and I absolutely agree there are plenty of questions out there that need answering, but again, as you know, there is a difference between the Taliban and Al-Qaeda in terms of, and operationally. This conversation had been going on for several years. A number of these members of Congress have been part of that conversation. Obviously, some had said they would not favor a swap, but then you also have, you know, you have stories, and I've seen video of John McCain and others saying we should do whatever it is that we can do to get them back. So,
and that is, by the way, a much more substantive reaction than some. I mean, I share the lament of how political this has become, and that's come from both parties, but one of the most striking examples recently is Rick Perry came out and said, is this actually about taking the VA scandal off of the front pages of newspapers? John, what do you think of that charge, and is that going too far in terms of political accusations?
I don't know about that, Ronan, but I do know that someone like Leon Panetta, who was a CIA director, was against releasing these five prisoners. These are high-value prisoners who could cause a lot of national security problems for the United States. So we have to look at the bottom of this trade. We have to ask ourselves, was he trying to do this for, was the president trying to do this for political reasons? Was there something that he wanted to get off his plate and get it done? A lot of people are making that charge, and it's not just Republicans. So there are a lot of questions that have to be answered. And the fascinating thing about this is the president thought he was going to win on this issue, and it's really become a problem for him.
Well, I think he thought he was doing a good thing by bringing an American soldier home.
Well, you know, I think more people on both sides are agreeing that Rose Garden moment might not have been the right choice. We'll see morally, but certainly in terms of the political fallout. And we may come back to both of you on that, because this is going to be a story that keeps on going. Karen Finney, John Feehery, appreciate it.
Thank you.
You can watch Karen Finney on Disrupt, 4 p.m. on the weekends here on MSNBC. Up next today.